It's important to be able to write code if you're a computer science engineer, no matter the rank that you're at.
Welcome to another episode of Engineering Aaj Kal. Today we have someone really interesting with us. His name is Koushik Ramchandra. He is currently a software architect at PhonePe. Before that, he worked for 3 years at Flipkart. He has done engineering from Osmania University and his master's work from IIIT Bangalore. What made him embark in such an interesting journey? Let's find out.
I always loved maths as a kid growing up. I always loved logic as a kid growing up. And I've been writing code from when I was about 10 years old, the time I was in 4th, 5th standards. Started writing Logo and then started writing Foxpro basic. And by the time I'm in 9th and 10th, I've already written like a host of programming languages. And so programming has always interested me as a kid. It's the things that you do as a kid that kind of sticks with you. But life takes a full circle, I suppose. I think about like 12 years later, when in masters, I used the same logo to run simulations on producer-consumer behaviors, which is welcome change from how I use logo. But yeah, it happened organically. I just enjoyed it. I was shown the opportunity, and I think I just enjoyed it.
So many engineers, honestly, after they graduate, they are very confused. Like some of them decide to continue doing a master just after engineering. Some decide to just go for job directly and not think of the masters. And then there are other people who decide to change and do something like MBA. Still, there's a lot of confusion around what should be the next step. So how does one decide that next step?
I suppose what happens is most people just get into engineering because that's the regular thing to do after your 12th. And when you're somewhere around 3rd and 4th year of engineering, people figure out there can be many casualties along the way, as in their interest will die down, or they realize that they're just not skilled enough, or they realize that it's not their calling, as cliched as it is. Or practically they realize it's not where they see themselves being in 5-10 years down the line. It's not a career that they wanted. Very few people really deflect from engineering to pursue passions in the truest sense. I guess they sort of look for career, which is unfortunate, but that's a reality of it. As for me though, look, I finished engineering in 2008. I finished it at a really wrong time in the larger economic strata of the world. Right. There was recession, and then I had jobs, like 3-4 of them, but then none of them happened. I'd always planned to do masters about 4 or 5 years after working. The logic then had been very simple. The logic was very simple. It was to say, gain some exposure, probably earn some money so that you can pay up your master's school fee. Right? And I think that was the biggest motivation more than anything. And so that was it. And I suppose recession hit as Providence had it. I was not jobless still. I mean, I was consulting with a bunch of companies. And masters happened because I thought, why not now if I had to do it in 4 or 5 years? But then in retrospect, though, I think doing masters is probably the best decision I've made in my life, in my academic life, more than wanting to write code as a 10-year-old. While I could romanticize that to world's end, but I think the best decision I made is doing masters. Masters was a leap of faith for me to say, you know what, let me just spend 2 more years and then learn a bit and then see where life takes me. Turns out life takes you places personally. You develop a mental faculty to deal with the most complex of problems, because you see, you only have 2 years in masters, unlike bachelors. Right? In bachelors, you kind of spread yourself out. You sort of start out slow, and then you kind of find your groove somewhere in 2nd, 3rd year. And in masters, it's get go from the day one, right? You're there. You have only 2 years. You've got the best minds around you, and you have to take as much as you can from them. That also might put a bit of an added pressure on you, but that's where your mental faculty gets toughened up. How do you not overwhelm yourself while squeezing the maximum juice that there is to be squeezed of the offering that is in front of you?
So you have done like 6-month internship in Sweden, and it was like a internship abroad. do people think about PPO when they do internship abroad, or is it actually just the experience that you guys are focusing on?
For me, I think it was for the experience. The company that I interned at was called Planeto. It was a gaming company. One of the founders of that company, Martin Wolfes, was a key member in Ubisoft. He built a company which later got acquired by Ubisoft. There was a scholarship in school called Linus Palme Scholarship in my master's school, and I'd gotten that Linus Palme Scholarship, and instantly most people really didn't apply for it because they thought, it'll come at the cost of a job. Right? Everybody wanted to intern at a classical company like a Samsung or an Intel with the hope that, there'd be a PPO at the end of it. But I done it at the cost of it. One thing I learned around that time, which was sort of a refreshing change of pace from what I had seen in India before, there was a method to a madness, right, at Planeto. We used to start around 8:30 in the morning and we used to sort of finish by 4. Nobody slogged beyond that. And we were 5x as productive than any other place that I had seen before and I have seen since to this date.
So, now your next job was in Flipkart. So again, Flipkart is a very aspirational company for like techies. How is it the whole interview experience different from like a person who's like going as a fresher?
The interview process was nothing different. Not that I had given many interviews before that also. It was my first real interview, so to speak. If you discard the ones that I had done in campus to get into these companies that I had gotten into, it was my first real interview. All the other jobs I had done was on the basis of my profile, my GitHub profile, or the projects I've done, or the trust I've built with the guys who started those companies. And the interview was very standard. I mean, there was a round to examine your proficiency in programming, and then one in problem solving. I remember fondly this managerial round that was done, and this guy said, we'll offer you this much money. And I was thinking to myself, shit, I get salary every month. Your foundational skills are going to be discussed regardless of the position you apply for. It's important to be able to write code if you're a computer science engineer, no matter the rank that you're at. You could be a software architect, you could be a head of engineering, you could be anything, or you could be a software engineer or a senior software engineer. You should be able to write code to solve a problem. It's a bit like having to have a command on a language to be able to communicate your ideas clearly. And the only way you communicate computer science ideas clearly is to be able to write code.
So what exactly that you did in Flipkart? Like, you were senior software engineer, but what was exactly the work that you were doing in Flipkart?
I was part of this team called supply chain. Instantly, my boss in Flipkart is still my boss today, and we really don't call him the boss. It's more like a big brother. So I started with supply chain. I was in the supply chain for 3.5 years at Flipkart. I had built the promise and logistics engine at Flipkart. If you open the Flipkart product page today, you see that, hey, you get this delivery in 2 days, 3 days, or you get it by this time and this is the cost, ABC, right? I had built that to scale it to a few hundred thousands of requests every second. That was my first venture at Flipkart, and I'd helped build the fulfillment ecosystem at Flipkart.
The job role that was like, from a senior software engineer to a principal software engineer, was there like any difference in the kind or the type of work that you were doing, or the type of people you were meeting to get that thing done?
More than your technical skills, which obviously sort of get better as you spend more time in anything. Spending enough time in the system teaches you a lot more about the system, about how your product thinks, about how the company strategy thinks. Because when you sort of start in and when you don't have a lot of context, you have this horse with a blinders on approach. You're tackling the problem headlong, you're plunging headlong to solve that. As you sort of age in a company traditionally, you figure out the compromises that are to be made. I guess that just increases as you sort of grow in a company. To me, I think that is the large difference. Every other thing is added bonus. You learn a lot of new things because you're solving a lot of new problems. Not with just respect to technology, but with respect to helping the company grow. I think there's this key word that people should use to measure themselves, which is efficiency. it's great that you're skilled, it's great that you're smart, it's great that you're bringing a lot to the table, but at the end of it, your skill and expertise needs to sort of align itself to help you to be efficient for the company. If you're not efficient, regardless of the skill you acquired, it's moot. That skill is moot. It's like a cow's opinion, it doesn't matter.
So like after Flipkart, you came to PhonePe, and now PhonePe is more like a fintech thing. And in Flipkart, you were doing something related to supply chain. So was it like difficult to like change to a different domain? How did you deal with it?
I couldn't think of anything that was really difficult as such, because the time I joined PhonePe, there were already a team of 8-9 folks, and the guys were all friends again. We were all friends much before we joined PhonePe, and the vision was already set. I guess it would have been hard. So as a company, there were challenges, not with respect to the complexity of the problems per se, but the industry that we were operating in. I come from a background where I was a completely tech-heavy guy, right? I hadn't seen operations before PhonePe, before fintech, because you haven't seen offline markets. I'd only seen offline markets after PhonePe. I'd seen why tech is not neither the beginning nor the end of all the problems. Being in fintech sort of opened my eyes to, I think, busted my bubble of arrogance that tech can do anything. Sort of realized that if you really don't help the world around you, the technology that you kind of incubate is useless. And I also realized, I think technology does not have an existence of its own if it's not useful to the world around you. I guess that's the massive paradigm shift in thought from what I had before PhonePe.
So, like the software architect as a role, it's an interesting role. Can you tell a little bit more about this role?
There are different domains in technology per se, right? There's front-end engineering, there's back-end engineering, there's infrastructure, there's data. Owing to your skill or the amount of time that you spent in the industry doing the thing over and over, you build an experience and a faculty to solve a set of problems. And in that domain, you still have to think holistically. So the role warrants that you be holistic about not a problem, but a set of problems, or a classification of, or a class of problems in a particular domain. For example, let's talk data. I'm just sort of giving you an example. Talk data. There's a bunch of problems in data. How do you as a company use data, process data, keep data, right? And there are people who've been doing this for decades. And there's something called an Android app or an iOS app, right? And people who've built apps and they know philosophies and principles of building an app for a long time now. So the role still warrants that you work in a pocket. It wouldn't be prudent even to sort of have somebody think holistically about every part of the org. It's not just practical, it's not pragmatic. Because you don't bring in everything. I guess communities get built only because you can't do everything by yourself.
So like any last suggestion, 1 or 2 tips that you would like to give to our audience? I'm
assuming all of them are computer science engineers, and if you're not also, regardless of the discipline that you're in, have your core skill. Always have your core skill. In case of computer science, it's being able to write code and understand how a computer works. And always have a secondary skill. Right? I'm not really talking about computer science per se. For example, I tell jokes, right? And if I used to make this joke to people that, if somebody ever were to fire me from my job, I'm like, please, jokes bata ke life zindagi ji lenge. Right? So have a secondary skill, so nobody really can pin you to a wall. Always have a secondary skill. So not a hobby, like a proper secondary skill, so you'd never be pushed to a wall and nobody can pin you down.
So thank you so much, Koushik, for this interview. It was really enlightening. I'm sure people who are listening to this interview will learn something out of it.
Appreciate your time and take care, man. Stay safe.